Hey, everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts. I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
Hello, Zach.
Tim,
welcome back.
Jinx.
Double jinx.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, you can talk now. What's going on, man? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'll be better when this is over.
You have been dreading doing this topic, not because it's bad, but because it's kind of dark, right?
It's dark. It's not fun. Cattle mutilation sucks.
Yeah, it
for
does.
everyone.
Yeah,
the cattle.
Right. That's why you're
the
vegetarian,
mutilators.
Right?
This is why I'm a vegetarian. Well, it's reaffirmed a lot of reasons why I'm a vegetarian. That has nothing to do with anything, man. It is a difficult topic. It's a difficult topic to research because it's just all over the place. And you can find like 30 or 40 different articles or books or reports. I mean, government reports, all sorts of stuff. And each one will come to a different conclusion. And at the end of the day, you're just like, what is going on?
So this is interesting because this happens with topics. Sometimes you have a nice, neat, pretty little package that's a conspiracy theory. It's pretty easy just to kind of get into what it is, do some extra research. This is one of those where it's like, okay, here's a topic. You go figure it out.
You're right.
And by the way, probably thousands of other people have looked into this.
Oh.
And they've not come to a conclusion. So you're suddenly tasked. You're just like, well, should I come to a conclusion? Like,
right.
It can be tricky. It can be hard to herd all these cattle. Anyways, you get the idea. It's a tough one to do.
It's a tough one to research. And like I said, it's also just a tough one to stomach. Huh? Okay.
But
all right. No
that
more.
was funny. But you can't do conspiracy theories in general and UFO stuff in general without touching on this.
Yes. Well, we'll get into it. This has come up a number of times in other episodes.
Exactly.
So just kind of tangentially related. But
right.
Okay. So on top of it being, hard to research and just almost too much information, it's gross. It's disturbing. It's hard to talk about because it's so vast and it's confusing. And on top of all of that, it's real. It is a very real thing and you can't ignore it.
And that doesn't mean, it's like you're not saying that aliens are coming down and doing this.
Sure.
But ranchers are finding cattle that have been mutilated.
Tens of thousands over the last 50 years. And it goes back even further, of course. And it's been documented and it's been studied. And like I said, there is no good answer. I mean, we're going to go through some of the more common theories.
Sure.
And we're probably going to debunk every single one of them. It's kind of like Dyatlov Pass, one of my favorite episodes that we ever did.
Yeah.
It's just that one was fun to do because it was just neat and compact and it was like a weekend and there's not a whole lot out there. But anyway, it's like Dyatlov Pass in the sense that there's theories and like nothing adds up. But there's theories and there's nothing adds up and there's just so much more to it. And it's just been happening for so long. Modern times, it's probably started in the late 60s, but it goes back a heck of a lot further. And tens of thousands of these cases. But all that being said, we all kind of have a general idea of what cattle mutilation is. You got a picture in your mind, maybe not. By the way, maybe I should preface this before we go too much further. This is kind of nasty. We're not going to focus on the gory, ugly, bloody details. But if you got little ears in the car, maybe now's the time to find a different episode or something. Anyway, that's your warning. But my point is it's easy to forget what it actually is. And I don't want to beat you over the head with this, but we're not going to talk about it every time I say a cattle mutilation occurred here and then there. So just keep this in mind as we talk. So generally speaking, most, if not all, mutilations, cattle mutilations, share the same characteristics. And they are finding a dead cow in the field with its anus or rectum area cored out and removed. Cored out and removed, okay? sex organs removed, one or both ears are cut off, one or both eyes are removed, the jaw and the tongue are gone, and the blood is completely drained out of this thing. No blood anywhere. And each cut, each incision is done with such perfect precision, it's almost frightening. I mean, it is frightening, of course, but like these utensils are just surgically sharp.
Right.
Anyone that looks at a fresh mutilation will come to the same conclusion. This isn't, like a Bowie knife or something like that.
Quick question, too, before we go any further, and if you don't mind, and maybe you don't know, so this seems to be a thing with cattle.
Yes.
I think I've seen a few with sheep also.
There are other animals that this occurs with. Cattle, like 98%, probably higher.
Sure.
Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on almost predominantly here. But yes, sheep, there's a horse, a famous horse, other animals too,
but basically it's cattle.
Basically it's cattle,
okay.
Right. The other thing to keep in mind is when they find this animal, there's no tracks, there's no trace, there's no footprints, there's no tire marks, there is nothing around. It's as if it were just dropped out of the sky and left there without, and not even like trampled grass.
Sure.
And scavengers will avoid this. Flies won't land on it. Other cattle won't come anywhere near it. And it's just bizarre. It's just confusing. So you got that, of course.
Very strange.
You got the image. The other thing I want you to keep in mind, it's easy for us to talk about cattle and cows, and unless you are a butcher or a rancher or a dairy farmer, you probably don't come into close contact with these every single day. Zach, have you ever stood next to a cow?
Yes.
Pretty big animal.
Huge, yes.
They're enormous.
Yeah, huge.
They are enormous and they are powerful. Yeah. And by doing this, I have learned the joys of bull riding, the 8 most dangerous 8 seconds in all of sports. And I've sent you some of those videos. It's wild. Anyway, that's a side tangent. But these are huge and powerful animals. And I know each breed and sex of the breed and all sorts of things, size varies. But generally, broadly speaking, on average, these things are about 5.5 feet tall, about 8 feet long, and somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 pounds. Or if you're on the other side of the pond, 630 kilos a piece.
Approximately as much as a cow.
Give or take, right. The other thing to keep in mind is where this is occurring. So this is in the American, and primarily, and we'll get into this, primarily the American West and Southwest. Okay, so have you ever been out west?
Many times.
And you just drive and you don't see anything for ever, because all you see is the horizons and the sky and the grass below you. There's just nothing out there. So keep that in mind, where it is, what it is, and everything like that. But put yourself into a rancher's boots, and they're out there either, on foot, or they're on an ATV or a horse or a truck or something. There's nothing around, nowhere, no tracks, and they come across one of these huge animals, dead, blood is drained, things are missing, and just no explanation. It is sickening, it is shocking, it's confusing, and it's terrifying.
Well, and obviously, the rancher is looking at this creature going, oh, it's too bad a wolf or a couple of coyote or whatever took this thing down. But then I think I'm assuming within or upon closer investigation, clearly that's not the case.
Very, very much so.
Right.
And I mean, there's a real financial implication when they lose these cattle as well. I mean, basic modern estimates I've gotten somewhere around $1,500 a head.
Sure.
So it's that's a dent in your pocketbook too. Yeah. So on top of all of those other feelings, it's I just lost a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So keep that in mind as we keep going. We're not going to harp on that over and over and over, but I want you to just kind of picture those images in your mind as we do talk about that. But this, as I said before, this has been documented long ways back, hundreds of years back, in fact. There's written accounts from the 1600s of animals being mutilated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's bizarre. seems to have occurred on all continents, but primarily in the United States, especially in modern times.
Yeah.
Now, there are some well-known Australian, there's some well-known English mutilations that have occurred, but when we're talking about this, especially when we are talking about this, this will be primarily in the United States. And the modern cattle mutilations, as I said earlier, started in the late 1960s, peaked in the mid to late 1970s, but they're still occurring.
Yeah.
Like even time of taping, there's cattle mutilations occurring out in Oregon right now. And everyone's just as baffled as they were 50 years ago. No one has any idea what's going on. Maybe we'll get to the bottom of it. I don't know. Okay. So there are some theories and ideas as to what this is or what's causing this that are more common than others. I'm just going to read them off. And then we're going to go through them.
Yeah.
Because why not? Let's just dive right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll talk about this as we go. We'll learn more. We'll figure it out. But theory number one, animals.
Yeah,
Just
other animals eating
predators,
them.
right. Stuff like that. Two, rustlers, cattle rustlers. Okay. Crypto creatures. You laugh. It's easy. Here's the thing. I love your chuckle. I love it. You're coming at it in the right way, but every single one of these, the more you know, the more you could laugh at every single one of these.
That's true.
Okay.
All right, fine.
Okay. Crypto creatures.
Cryptids.
Table it. Cryptids.
All right.
Ultraterrestrials. Not extraterrestrials, but ultraterrestrials. We'll get into the exact definition of that in a moment.
Well, they're just even cooler than the regular old terrestrials. It's kind of this.
I think the terrestrials, ultraterrestrials, extraterrestrials, yeah. Satanists.
Okay.
UFOs. And the good old US of A government.
Got it.
Uncle Sam.
Okay.
Those are the big ones. Each one has reasons why it could be true. Each one has reasons why it can't be true. We'll figure it all out. Maybe we'll land on something at the end, or maybe you'll leave scratching your head even more than when you started. I don't know. All right. Before we dive into those, let's give a little brief introduction here. So you can't talk about cattle mutilations without talking about the most famous, the first modern mutilation, Snippy the Horse. Which is neither a cattle mutilation, and Snippy is also not the name of the horse. So like everything's weird.
Okay. Yeah.
The horse's real name is Lady. But the newspaper writers thought Snippy was a
right. All right.
And it's not funny at all, but I'm still going to laugh at some of this stuff. So this was publicized or hit the newspapers September 8th, 1967. They found this horse just in the middle of nowhere. This was a rancher's. I think they had like 2 horses on the ranch. This was one of them. And found it with the flesh, muscles, hide all removed. The bones were exposed and bleached white. There were no tracks anywhere. There were burn marks, but those burn marks were like a ways away from the body, so that was confusing. There was high radiation levels near the body, and no scavengers tried to eat it. So everyone was like, what's going on? They started questioning the locals, given, that the locals are like miles away because this is, ranch land. There were UFO sightings in and around the area leading up to the mutilation. And on the day that the horse actually disappeared, there was another UFO sighting that a number of people saw.
Hey, quick question. I'm sorry, where was it again?
Yeah, American West. I don't have the exact state. It honestly doesn't matter too much at this point. But the American West. Anyway, so they did an investigation. The sheriff looked into it. He said Snippy Lady was killed by a lightning strike. So, which left everyone just completely not satisfied. It's like, no, I've seen animals that get killed by lightning. Their flesh isn't missing. The bones aren't bleached white. That doesn't make sense. But the sheriff wanted to, I assume, just, check this off their list and move on to the next crime or something like that to solve.
Of course, yeah.
So it's weird. Still no answer to it. I believe if you go on line you can the owner of Snippy's Bones has it up for sale. So if you're into this sort of thing and you have like $30,000 you want to drop,
pretty soon it'll be like an NFT, like guaranteed. All right.
All right. So the other big one that we have to talk about here, if you do talk about cattle mutilations, is Alexander Hamilton. And I know what you're thinking. You want to be in the. You want to know, was he in the room where it happened? No, he was not.
Sure.
Because this actually occurred in 1897, which means it was not the bastard orphan son of a whore and a Scotsman, Alexander Hamilton. It was a guy from Kansas who also shared the name.
Cool name.
Alexander Hamilton.
I was going to say 1897 sounds a little late to me.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
No, this Alexander Hamilton was a leading businessman. He was a stock dealer. He was one of the founding men of the state of Kansas. He fought during the Civil War. He was a representative in the state legislature. He helped found the county he lived in. And one day he said, "Holy smokes, I saw a UFO take my cow and I found it mutilated in the field the following day."
Oh, wild. So this is like way before UFO stuff. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. He was 65 years old at the time. And as I kind of said without saying, like, kind of an upstanding member of the community, right?
Not somebody that you would expect to go around saying, yeah, a UFO
took my cow. Right?
Yeah.
So he even went so far as to have 14 people, including a notary public, sign a statement saying that he was an honest individual.
So I love this.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's absolutely like, what? Come to find out, I don't know where I come out down on this at the end of the day, but come to find out, a magazine looked into this in 1977 and found out, allegedly, that Mr. Alexander Hamilton was part of a local liars club.
Wait, what year did they do their investigation?
18.
Oh, okay. I think you said 1997, which is why it's
1997. A magazine looked into this.
It's like 100 years later.
Yes.
What?
And found out that Mr. Alexander Hamilton was part of a local liars club. And those 14 people, including the notary public, may have all been in on this. A lot of times passed. I don't know. I don't want to besmirch the good name of Mr. Hamilton from the state of Kansas, but...
I don't think the statute of limitations has run yet, so...
Okay, all right.
Be very careful.
Allegedly.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're in the clear.
We're square.
But do you remember the name Val Johnson?
Of course.
Of course.
The Val Johnson incident.
The Val Johnson.
From the upper western corner, really, of Minnesota.
Marshall County. The first live show we did.
Yes.
Go back and listen to that one. If you've skipped it because you don't know who Val Johnson is, it was a really
good show. And it was downtown historic St. Paul, Minnesota, which is, folks, the capital of Minnesota. Despite what you're probably thinking.
All right. Well, Val Johnson, as we all know by now, was a sheriff driving around that had his window cracked, his front windshield cracked by a UFO. Just bonkers bizarre.
And legitimately one of the few high-profile cases that most people just assume was actually a UFO.
Yeah.
Like, really? So anyways,
right.
Super interesting. Keep going.
Yeah, so that was on August 27th. Also on August 27th in Perkins County, Nebraska, 2 mutilations occurred, cattle mutilations occurred, and multiple helicopter sightings all around that area. Now, I don't know if the two are related or not.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because it's like 700 miles in between the two, but we also know UFOs can
travel at the rate.
They go pretty fast, but maybe,
still.
Maybe it's related, maybe not. Okay. John Keel. You've heard of John Keel.
Yes.
If you're not familiar with our Patreon, we have a Patreon on this show.
www.patreon.com/crackpotpodcast.
Thank you very much. We did an episode on the Mothman prophecies, which John Keel wrote. It is one of my favorite episodes. I know I've said that like 6 times already. Anyway, it's really good. It's really great. It's about this UFO flap that happened in West Virginia between 66 and 68. And he was there on the grounds interviewing people, seeing all sorts of bizarre stuff happen. He also ran across a cattle mutilation that occurred during that whole flap, and he interviewed the person whose land it was on, and they said that they saw some, quote, rustlers out there in the general area. This woman said that they were very tall. They wore all white coveralls, and they could run extremely fast and jump over fences.
So, okay, hold on. Let's break that down for a sec, because what you're saying, what she was saying was she saw people trying to steal these cattle, right? However, I think really the logical next step is because they were tall, because they're probably wearing something unusual and could run really fast and jump really high or whatever, like maybe they weren't people?
Maybe they weren't people.
Right.
Also, to be perfectly clear, she saw people in the general vicinity of where they found the mutilation. So, I mean, it's very easy to draw that connection. I don't mean to dismiss that, but yes, that is exactly it. Like, maybe these weren't actually people.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Another one, another kind of famous sort of mutilation type thing. John F. Kennedy Jr. worked for a summer on a ranch out west.
Oh, it's bizarre.
It's weird. I guess if you got a lot of money and you just want to get away from whatever.
Working on it is cool, but I'm surprised to hear that he did, had some.
Yeah, he was the first person. He was 17 years old at the time. He was the first person to come across a mutilation, reported to the authorities and all sorts of stuff like that.
That's interesting. Yeah,
it's bizarre.
Yeah. Well, it's not what it means is it's not just people that are like your traditional farmhands or whatever. It's like a higher profile person for whatever it's worth also witnessed this, which is interesting. Okay.
And, of course, the Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We know all sorts of mutilations happen there. You can go back and listen to, I think that's a 2-part episode. Great, fun, weird. You want to talk weird and bizarre, check out Skinwalker Ranch. Okay. A little bit of an intro, a little bit to wet your whistle. Let's start breaking down some of these theories. Let's start with animals and scavengers. Very common for people. Well, I'll just leave. I don't want to paint anyone with a broad brush, but a common thing people say is like cattle are out in fields. There's all sorts of other animals out in the field. It doesn't take too much of a stretch to say that it's a coyote or a mountain lion or a bobcat or a raptor or even a domesticated dog that's getting after these cattle and mutilating them.
Mm-hmm.
So
it could be, except for the fact that it's so surgically done, right? And that there's like no obvious bite marks.
Right. I mean, okay. So before we get into that, I mean, it would explain a lot of the missing soft tissue.
Sure.
So gross as it sounds, but like the anus and the sex organs and the mouth, it's soft tissue. It's easy for these animals to bite into and eat and so on and so forth. But like you said, surgical precision. There's no tooth marks. They're not ripping flesh. It's like it's literally cut with a scalpel or a laser or something like that. These mutilations also don't have any tracks near them. They are missing all their blood.
Yeah, right.
Eyeballs are just like popped out of the skull. You know, these are not okay. Maybe a raptor could do that, I guess. So, but it doesn't really add up. So, birds, bobcats, coyotes, where do you come down?
Well, it's the most logical explanation. So I'm inclined to believe it. However, I mean, nothing is consistent with those animals or creatures eating it. So
sure. I think that perhaps some dead cattle could be attributed to
a percentage. Yeah, a small
animals.
Percentage. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not these high-profile cases, not the tens upon thousands of just bizarre and frightening and just everything else.
Yes.
Things that people see. Okay, let's talk about cattle rustlers, cattle thieves. Not just something that you see in the Old West movies.
All right.
On occasion, there are people that are seen in the general vicinity, not just like John Keel, but sometimes they see like people out in the field beforehand.
Yeah.
And maybe they hear trucks or they hear helicopters or something like that. And it's like, okay, maybe they're just stealing cattle.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes sense too.
It does.
But you wouldn't steal them and then leave them there to die.
Exactly.
Like dead, right? So,
thank you. Why would you leave the body?
Well, I guess the only thing I would say is, if not cattle rustlers for the sake of like actually stealing cattle, then perhaps for the sake of like hurting somebody else's financial outlook.
You could just very easily kill a cow.
Yeah, I know. But it's like, well, maybe. But then I guess you would say, okay, well, that .22 that shot the cow, that bullet matches the chamber of whatever. You see where
timeout 22 okay 30-06.
Yeah, whatever. Right.
Okay, but anyway,
But you get my point. So I guess you could say
they could trace that back. Yes.
Yeah.
But we're talking like multiple states. We're talking like 50 years and all kind of. Yes,
I'm just saying.
I know you admit that it's not a good explanation, but it doesn't make sense. But like, I mean, if you're a cattle rustler, why would you
just leave it there?
Why would you leave all the steaks and ribs and
makes no sense.
rump roast and all that stuff? It makes zero sense.
Right.
And also, how do you do it without any tracks?
Well, there's the
evidence?
actual question of how do you actually really do it to begin with?
Yeah. Where are you putting the blood? And also, why are you taking all the blood?
And why are you just doing this to begin with? It's weird.
So stop being weird.
Yeah.
Stop killing these cows. It's weird, man.
I wish they'd listen.
You're weirding people out.
Just listen to the show.
Hopefully they will. All right. Your favorite. Cryptids, or as I call them, crypto creatures.
Yeah, these are crypto creatures. What is this?
I don't know.
Roadside attraction?
That's what the book referred to. By the way, guys, a lot of this stuff I got from Stalking the Herd by Christopher O'Brien. There's lots of books out there. I found this one interesting in the Amazon review, so that's the one I mostly focused on. I did a lot of other research outside of this, but check it out if you can't get enough dead cows. It's all there. Anyway.
Yeah.
He refers to them as crypto creatures. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, obviously, what comes to mind are things like werewolves.
I'm gonna stop right there. I'm gonna stop. Big feet. Thank you. I'm gonna stop right there. I wanna read this case that happened on Boxing Day in 1975. So December 26, 1975. Great Falls, Idaho. There are two girls in their house, and they see that their horses are acting real spooked and strange. They're just not acting the way they should. And they went outside to see just kind of what's up. And one of them looked through the scope of her .22, and she said about 200 yards away, she saw a 7 to 7.5 foot tall individual that was twice as wide as a normal human and dark hair and a face that was not human.
Interesting.
Okay. She saw this through her scope. She fired the gun into the air once. This thing dropped to the ground, waited a couple beats, and then started army crawling for a distance, stood up, and ran away. And then,
weird.
Of course, as happens in these cryptid cases, they get this overwhelming sense of dread. There's a smell of rotten eggs, this sulfurous odor, and of course, they find a mutilation on their ranch the following day. So there is that. Also, before you start, going into it too much further, another one that we really haven't talked much about on this show, chupacabras.
Yeah, no, okay.
Your nod of resignation tells me all I did.
So dude, I didn't even tell you this, but I was looking into this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is actually, there's more to it than I really want to admit. So like I will say, I view cryptids, like
it's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, I'm not going to categorically say I don't believe in them, but like I'm just very skeptical.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you.
So, but I get it.
I'm right there with you.
It's a viable, I guess, angle.
But chupacabras in general, if you're not familiar, and this is like not a lot of research on my end, so I'll own that. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, like reptilian in nature, I think.
I think it actually like literally means something about like a goat person, and so it's more like.
Okay, I might be way off.
Yeah, no, it's like a hairy person that can shapeshift.
Okay. I didn't know the shape-shifting part.
Yes.
I do know that they are known for their vampiric qualities. They drink blood.
Yeah, and they can look like a goat. They can look like I think even a bear sometimes. So it's like they just look like wild creatures. Usually on two legs.
Easy. Okay.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
I don't know.
Right? Okay. But my point at coming in with this is that they drink blood, or they're known to.
Sure.
This the chupacabra phenomenon, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think started in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. It's generally like Central American, maybe Mexican in region.
Yeah, it's Latin American.
Some American Southwest, perhaps.
Sure.
But probably not chupacabras. I'm just going to cross it off the list right away because when they drink, they have puncture holes in the neck of these animals.
Sure.
And in these cattle mutilations, there are no puncture holes in them, period.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. Sorry to cut you off right there. But anyway, Bigfoot, Chupacabra, pick your cryptid.
Well,
what do you think?
The percentage of me that thinks these things can be real also then is the percentage of me that thinks this could be a viable conspiracy theory angle.
Which is?
Like 2%.
2. All right, we're making progress.
It's way down there.
I mean, but that thing that those two girls saw, that sounded like a Bigfoot.
No, it's true.
Right?
It's true. Yeah.
Also, okay, so 200 yards away through a scope. Okay, so, take that into account. How would they know 7 to 7.5 feet tall?
You'd really have to look at the objects around it, or
right?
the physical, landscape and everything else around it.
I'm thinking, what if it's not? What if that's like someone in a ghillie suit?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because then they do it like a literal army crawl and then run away.
That's a good point.
So
that's a very good point.
I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with some of these other theories, but to me that sounds like someone in like some full like real camouflage.
The only thing it wouldn't explain unless they're just
like the rotten eggs, the sense of dread.
Yeah. Unless I suppose you're just frightened or spooked or whatever.
I would be spooked.
Yeah.
Like I would be spooked.
That's how you feel after you see a mutilated cow.
Right. Maybe the smell was psychological. Maybe I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, it's very easy to poke holes in all of this stuff. But on the flip side, because let's not just completely discount cryptids. If you believe in cryptids, if you believe in the Bigfoot phenomenon, and there are plenty of people who do, and I don't want to just completely sweep it all under the rug, that might be some sort of explanation for this because it's all just so weird. It's all just so weird. So why not just have a weird explanation to a weird problem? You know what I mean?
No, that's why I'm not going to dismiss it because, like, by the way, like, if you believe in cryptids, I don't think you're stupid. I don't even think the idea is stupid. It's nothing like that. It's like I have a hard time believing that there are things out there that, shapeshift or, when we talk about the breeding population and all this kind of stuff, it just seems really unlikely.
Yes.
That being said, based on what they're observing with these mutilated cows, it's like, well, I guess this just makes this makes as much sense as anything else.
Kind of. I think it makes as much, but also probably less sense. So, all right. I mean, we probably overstayed our welcome on the cryptids. So let's move on. Okay. Let's talk about my favorite, ultraterrestrials. So we've talked about this in the past in different episodes. Of course, extraterrestrial means from a different planet. Mm-hmm. Ultraterrestrials, at its just really most boiled down form, is like a different dimension.
Yeah, right.
So
good luck with that.
Prove me wrong. No, but this is a theory that not cattle mutilations per se, but this is ultraterrestrials are something that's propagated by people like John Keel, people like Jacques Vallée, people like Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was part of Project Blue Book, and then later backed off and said that Project Blue Book was a giant waste of time, more or less. But other realities, other dimensions, we're talking like the pixie and fairy phenomenon, the elvish phenomenon, the alien phenomenon. These people think that these are not creatures or entities from a different planet. They're just right here alongside of us in other dimensions, all part of the same phenomenon. Actually, we table this thought, ghosts, apparitions. They also attribute that to different dimensions.
Ghosts are just culpable in this situation.
Kind of. We're going to talk about whether or not shape-shifting ghosts from a different dimension are causing cattle mutilations. That's what this podcast is.
Do we have standing to try these cryptids?
Oh, my God.
Creatures, whatever they are.
No, but I mean, seriously, cattle mutilations are real.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
Something is causing them.
Yes.
We are going to throw the entire book at this and see if we can figure it out. So why not, man? Here's the best explanation I can come up with to say that it's ultraterrestrials. Laugh if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Animal sacrifice has existed for tens of thousands of years across cultures, across continents.
Right.
People were sacrificing animals to different gods or deities or celestial events for good fortune or good health or good harvest or good, you name it. And by and large, that has pretty much dropped off over the last, I don't know, pick your number, 1,000, 100 years, whatever, right?
A couple hundred at least, yeah.
What if these things that these people were sacrificing these animals to are not getting their sacrifices anymore. And they're angry, and they're coming back and demanding sacrifice.
Well, this would explain why they did it. But you have to you're making two
I'm
jumps
making a lot of jumps here, man. I'll admit it.
But so what you're saying is, okay, so there's kind of door A and B. Door A is ultra-terrestrial creatures, which could have any motivation that they want for doing this. So, for instance, it could be a creature, being, thing from the sixth dimension.
Totally.
That just stumbles into this dimension or whatever, comes here deliberately and says, we want to study what's going on. Okay, let's start with these. There's like billions of cattle. There's more cattle probably on this planet than humans, right?
Yeah.
So let's start there. Let's see what kind of gases are in the air. A lot of methane, all this pollution. What's driving? Oh, geez whiz. Okay,
sure, right.
Let's study these cattle. Okay. We got to take them apart, obviously, and they have whatever technology is available in the sixth dimension. And then they do it and they leave. Oh, that's the cow planet.
You're right.
Right?
It's a cow dimension. Yeah.
Thank you, cow dimension. Yeah. And so I think that's what it is. But what you're saying is, okay, let's build upon the fact that we know humans have sacrificed animals, to deities. Okay, fine. That's sad, but whatever. It is what it is. Perhaps these deities, which coincidentally were in different dimensions now, are not getting their quota of sacrificed animals, therefore coming back.
Yep.
And it's just a DIY job.
Yep.
All right, humans, we'll leave you alone. You're not sacrificing, but we're going to get these cattle.
Yeah, we don't want the steaks. Yeah. We don't want any of that stuff. We don't want the T-bone.
We're not going to flood the earth. Right. Because you haven't sacrificed. We're going to take
We just want the blood, the ears, the jaw, the anus, the sex organs, and,
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. Did I capture it?
Yeah. So, where do you land?
Well, I would land... It's a logical explanation, assuming
everything. I'm not laughing at you.
No, I know.
It's just so goofy, man.
This is where it's interesting to hear real physicists and scientists talk about, there's different dimensions.
Oh, yes. So trust me, we will do those episodes. Yes.
So in a sense, this actually isn't that outlandish. More or less, because we know they do kind of exist.
Well, it's kind of, it's the thing when you talk about aliens and UFOs. It's like anything's on the table. It's like, it's whatever you want it to be. Until they come down and tell us their motives, it's whatever you want it to be.
There
so anyway,
what, enough.
1%, 2%, 3%? I don't know.
Oh, I'd give this much higher.
Oh, okay. That's rad, man. I love that.
This is all within the context of cattle mutilations. So I'm just, what does 80% of me really think that this could be done by ultra-terrestrial beings? Probably not. But I would say within what we've discussed so far, this is way more believable, and therefore I'll put 30% on
Dude, yes.
I'm going up there.
Nice.
Makes sense to me.
I'll give it a cool 15. But I mean, honestly, it makes more sense than Scavengers or cattle rustlers.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
It's
prove me wrong.
It's just so goofy. Okay. Let's table that.
Okay.
Let's go to Satanists.
All right.
Okay.
Not Satanists.
No?
Go.
Okay. All right. Well, This was one of the predominant theories that pretty much everyone believed. It started in around 1973, and it didn't just come out of nowhere because, at least in Idaho, there were people seen out in these fields wearing hoods and cloaks and masks over their faces, and then mutilations would occur.
Sure.
So they're like, well, who wears hoods and cloaks and kills animals? It's got to be those Satanists, right? Yeah,
lots of different cults, organizations, everything have cloaks. To say Satanist is just
okay. Well,
it's a trope. Is my point.
It totally is.
So that's
also, I mean, it really. I'm not going to belabor the point, but it has nothing to do with the actual Church of Satan.
Right, correct.
Right, but anyway, that's a different topic for a different day. But Kansas sheriff blamed it on witches and hippies in 1973 when they started looking into it. So, who do I hate? Witches, hippies? Yeah, it's them.
It's
okay,
totally,
sure,
whatever. Yeah.
But there were 81 mutilations in a span of like 2 years or a year and a half or something this in Kansas, and they offered a $500 reward for anyone that would give information that would lead to the arrest and conviction of whoever was doing this. And this moved up, and it finally got to the field office of the FBI in Kansas in December of 1973, and they started looking into it, and word got out, and these two inmates by the name of Dugan and Bankston, they came forward and they said, we know what it is. We know exactly who it is.
Yeah.
It's this group. We were part of them. We can hook you up with them. They're called the Sons of Satan.
Oh, okay.
They go out and they do this, and they do it all over the country. It's part of this black magic ritual. It's all, you get it, right? Didn't take long for the FBI to quickly figure out that they were making it all up to try to get reduced sentences. So
clearly, that sounds so fake. It's funny though.
But
whatever. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, it's like you go back to like the logical. It's like, okay, maybe Satanists are the right people to blame. Maybe they're not. But you pick your like evil cult, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do black magic.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, okay, well, animals are dying and it's weird and it's like unexplained. It's got to be them, right?
It makes sense. That like I get that line of thinking.
Yes.
I just dismiss it.
Do you dismiss that it's like a cult doing it, or do you dismiss that it's Satanists? And I don't even know why I'm okay.
Yeah, I would say Satanists because I know we've taken some heat for this or whatever in the past, but I don't really care, quite frankly. Like Satanists get blamed for a lot of stuff, and it's like it's not them. It's like the Church of Satan just doesn't believe in a deity, so they wouldn't be sacrificing anything anyways.
Exactly.
That's like the whole point.
Exactly.
So anyways, again, I don't care, but that's that. But I could see how it would be easy to say, okay, we think we saw some people out in the field, and they were wearing or dressed funny or different or whatever, and so therefore they must have been performing some dark rituals. Who does that? Oh, probably, I don't know, Satanists, occultists.
100%.
I mean, that's how it comes from. The word comes from, I would say. So
yeah. So you're putting it at a sounds like a zero.
Well, only because we cannot explain the type of incisions that are made.
Yeah.
We can't explain what's happening.
Like, how do they get out? How do you kill like a 1,500-pound animal and leave no tracks, no traces? Where do you put all the blood? Like, what do you like? How are you making these cuts? How are you doing it across like thousands of miles?
Well, and that's just it too. So it's like you and I have both watched documentaries on this kind of stuff, read books about this kind of stuff, and if it was as simple as we think it's some occultists, like all those people that have written books on the topic,
right,
done these investigations, like they would have come to the same conclusion, and they don't. They're just saying it's a possible theory, but it's not. Doesn't seem to be consistent with the evidence.
It's a possible theory.
Okay.
But zero?
I'm saying zero.
Yeah.
This is less than a cryptid. How about that?
Whoa! Hey, nice. On the record.
All right.
Good. Okay. And that pretty much more or less leaves us with...
aliens?
Yeah.
Like straight up extraterrestrial.
Well, okay. I guess there's two left. So UFOs.
Okay.
And the government. Right?
Oh, I forgot about the government.
Yeah.
I always do. Anyways.
Well, they don't forget about you, Zach.
I'm sorry. Anyways, let's get to
Well, let's talk about UFOs.
Yeah.
And when we talk about UFOs, we're also going to talk about helicopters. And if you did this episode, it could be completely different. If you guys don't agree with this, do your own episode. I would love to listen to it.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
But anyway, in my mind, I find the two pretty much one and the same. Not one and the same, but like you can't talk about one without the other. So we're going to talk about UFOs and we're going to talk about helicopters at the same time.
Okay.
It's kind of confusing. I don't mean to make it confusing. But I want to read a quote from a Newsweek article. This was in the September 30th, 1973 issue of Newsweek. So bear with me here. It says... Since last May, that's 1973, more than 100 cattle have been found dead and gruesomely mutilated in Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa. A few residents report sighting strange creatures resembling bears and gorillas, and at least one farmer claims that a shiny UFO landed in a field where slaughtered animals were found later. A helicopter often has been seen hovering over the range around the time of a mutilation, and some ranchers swear they have been chased down lonely roads by helicopters. Helicopters are also said to have been used in cattle rustling, and some stockmen think that the rustlers may be collecting blood and organs as lures for cattle grazing on the open range this fall. Quote, "The predators are not wolves," end quote, insists Senator Burback. "They are a semi-domesticated, two-legged animal called man." Some officials are beginning to worry that the real danger is not some ghostly butcher, but keyed-up vigilantes themselves after 2 slugs pierced the canopy of a utility company helicopter. Checking power lines, the Nebraska National Guard ordered its helicopter pilots to cruise cross-country at higher altitudes than usual to avoid being fired upon by frightened ranch hands. And then quotes another guy who's a folklorist, and he says, "It could be someone setting up a fertility cult of some kind, or it could be someone putting you on. If they are putting you on, they are pretty sick." So,
can you condense that for us?
Condense that for you. There's a lot of weird helicopter sightings around cattle mutilations, which I have semi-intentionally kind of avoided talking about up to this point. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens with enough occurrence that it is worth noting. Also, there are a lot of UFO sightings that seem to happen in and around these areas of the cattle mutilation. So, famous cattle mutilation researcher Linda Moulton Howe, she wrote a number of books. I think Harvest or Strange Harvest is one of the more popular ones. I think there's a documentary she did as well. She is of the opinion 100% it's UFOs. They're coming down. They're taking cattle. We don't know why, but they're doing it, and that's why it's so weird and precise and no tracks, etc. And hey, as we've talked about before, when it comes to UFOs, yeah, I mean,
could be
anything's on the table, right?
Right.
Literally anything is on the table.
Right.
And I don't mean to gloss over that completely, but it is equally, if not more important in my mind, to focus on the helicopters.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's a real tangible thing that is terrestrial in nature, and everyone knows what they look like, and no one's going to mistake it, generally speaking. And now that I say that out loud, it's also worth noting, and this is going to sound bonkers, so bear with me, but there are cases where people see helicopters, but they are actually UFOs.
Okay.
And they see UFOs that are what they think disguised as helicopters. It's like this.
Well, this reminds me so much of when we talk about what people experience or think they see around UFO abductions.
Yes.
Right? Owls that are like 4 feet tall, 5 feet tall, walking down a path or something. Just screen memories?
Screen memories.
Thank you. That's what it sounds like.
It does. So Whitley Strieber, one of the more famous
ufologists,
abduction expert. Yeah, he was the one that wrote Communion and a number of other books. He claims that like these helicopters were harassing him, but like they weren't making sound, and they just looked off enough that they weren't, like, if you really, really looked at it, you could tell that it wasn't actually a helicopter kind of thing. It's super bizarre.
Do you know, does this touch on some of the black helicopter stuff?
Kind of.
Okay.
Yes.
And just like very quickly, I mean, that's a show topic unto itself. It's super
so
interesting. But
weird.
it's almost like Men in Black, but helicopters in and around UFO sightings.
Right.
People being harassed.
Right.
If they saw something weird, that kind of
so
a thing.
I mean, I'm muddying this whole part of this, unfortunately, but
it just sounds confusing. It sounds like it's hard.
It is. Yeah. It is. So I guess to really, really sum this all up, what some people think are UFOs might be helicopters and vice versa.
Sure.
So we're both on the record. The United States government's on the record as saying UAP, UFO are real phenomenon. So we're not going to dismiss it completely, right? But anyway, okay. You have cases where like a heifer was found mutilated in a field with nothing around it, of course, but it was in the middle of like a 30-foot diameter flattened grass. Okay. What can do that? Like rotary blades.
Right. From a helicopter.
Rotor blades. Yeah. There was a rash of mutilations, or a wave of mutilations, Pixies call out anyway, in Pueblo County, Colorado. And then like these ranchers were driving down the road and a helicopter just like drove their pickup off the road. Police responded and they fired like 30 rifle at it and they heard it hit and then it just like flew away. It's like these things are around. The case in Wyoming where cops were chased down a country road at 90 miles an hour by several helicopters. Between September and October in that Wyoming kind of flap, I guess if you could call it, 1975, 35 cows were all mutilated in that area.
Bizarre.
Absolutely bizarre. Like the whole thing is bizarre. And I'm just gonna tease you with this. Also nearby that case in Wyoming in 1975, there's a pretty extensive uranium mine nearby.
Okay.
Just hold on to that for a second. I just want to mention that. So mutilations in Missouri during a UFO flap. Many people saw an off-shaped UFO craft that some said was a helicopter, some said was a UFO. No one could really decide. You got this case in April of 1980 in El Paso County, Colorado. A rancher heard loud machinery sounds coming from the field. Next day he goes out there, his horse is mutilated, and nothing will go near it. Scavengers, predators, other animals, they won't go near it. There's no elevated radiation levels. There's no odor. There's no bloating. There's no like decomposition of the animal. But like machinery sounds, like what's up with that? That's frightening. It's weird. Also, what does that even mean? Like what kind of machine, right?
Nobody knows. Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, picture again, like these wide open plains, like just grazing cattle, right? These people will hear a chopper and then they just can't see it. It's nowhere. And they could probably see like 12 miles in every single direction, right? Or they'll see helicopters fly by and not hear them.
Right. Can't explain it.
You can't. So Jacques Vallée in his book Messengers of Deception, great book, check it out if you like this sort of stuff. He says, we are entering a new era when we must tread very carefully. Some of the evidence we have may have been planted to mislead us into false conclusions. The connections with UFOs appears especially tricky and, if proven, would still not answer all of our questions. Someone could be simulating UFO events to turn the investigators' attention away from the real cause of mutilation, or it may be that mutilations are in fact the next step in the unfolding process directly related to UFOs. And it's also worth mentioning that besides the sightings and everything else, one of the main catalysts, I guess, to this whole UFO phenomenon and blaming UFO for cattle mutilations was an abduction. Judy Doherty was her name. She was abducted, she claims, by UFO in May of 1973 from her Texas home through hypnotic regression. She claims that she saw cattle on board the UFO.
Oh, wow.
So they kind of like drew that parallel and connected those dots. And
okay,
we could talk all day long about the merits or demerits of hypnotic regression, but
it's very interesting.
That's kind of where that's at. So in favor of UFOs or helicopters?
I think I would say, with the UFO government helicopter angle, it makes as much sense as anything else at this point. I would say, to me, it's more like a 15 to 20%-ish.
Right,
maybe.
right.
I don't know. It's hard. It's just I don't know enough about it to really.
I mean, okay. It would explain it.
It would explain
but
it.
Like you could use UFOs to explain nearly anything if you wanted to, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
As we have.
Ad nauseum. But on the flip side, why? And I know it's pointless to talk about motives of like extraterrestrials or ultra-terrestrials or whatever else, but it's like, why? Like, what do they want? Blood? Like
study animals.
Yeah, just
I think,
over and over, like tens of thousands of them, always doing the same thing.
Could be different creatures. It doesn't have to be the same. It's not like the same literal, creatures necessarily.
Sure.
Could be other dimensional creatures coming across.
It's like 10,000 different dimensions.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. Why not? Right.
Seriously. Yeah.
So maybe it's some sort of genetic altering. Maybe it's like has to do with the human embryo harvesting that people talk about when it comes to alien abduction, But
exactly.
To me, sure, you could explain it with UFOs.
Yep.
To me, it also sounds really, really lazy. Of course, I just don't buy it. And this is coming from like Mr. UFO. Like,
that's fascinating.
You know me.
I do.
I love to pin anything I can on aliens or UFOs because it's fun to talk about. But it's like this. It doesn't make sense. Why would you do it over and over and over again? Always the same motive, always the same parts, always the same thing. For what? It's like, here we are, 2021, right? Our stupid, society that's still like lighting stuff on fire to propel ourselves forward into outer space. It's like we can grow lab meat in a lab. Like, why would they need to keep taking animal cattle anuses, right?
Exactly.
Makes no sense.
Exactly.
Okay. So now let's talk about the government.
Yes.
Okay, so David Perkins is like the proponent when it comes to blaming the government for cattle mutilations. He found the correlation. He was one of the first proponents of this correlation that found that if you put little pinpoints in a map of all the cattle mutilations in one color, right, and then you put pinpoints in a map, the same map, of a different color where there's all the nuclear facilities and all the missile bases and uranium mines. There seems to be quite an overlap.
Got it.
Okay.
That's interesting.
So silos, uranium mines, nuclear power plants, weapon enrichment facilities, and cattle mutilations. Like the concentric circles aren't exactly the same circle, but it's like,
yeah, there's a correlation there.
There's a pretty big correlation. Idaho National Reactor Testing Station, every single county surrounding that facility has had multiple cattle mutilations.
Interesting.
So why is that?
Radiation poisoning?
Uh-huh.
Is that where you're going with this?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. Another interesting proximity correlation is that northeastern Alabama is like one of the other like mutilation central hotspots. Has 2 military bases right nearby. You look at Ground Zero in Colorado, that's 6 military bases and NORAD right there. Yeah. It's all right there.
That's where this is going.
Dulce Base. Or Dulce. I'll never get that right. Yeah. Dulce Base was hit pretty hard with mutilations in the late 1970s. We talked about this on the show too. So June 14th, 1981, the police were brought in to investigate that, and they found right nearby this mutilation, they found fluorescent markings on the head of several cattle. They found a gas mask on the ground nearby and radar chaff, which is actually small pieces of aluminum that like you spread out in the air to like, mix up radar.
Okay.
Kind of like cloak yourself more or less. And they also found a weird sort of electronic device on the ground.
Okay. Like a Geiger counter type thing?
Well, they took it and they figured out, took it to some experts. Yeah. They found out that it was an Air Force high altitude temperature pressure sensor.
Huh.
So, and this is like right next to a cattle mutilation.
Right.
So you have people like David Perkins who say, okay, so they got sloppy one time, but that's all we need is that one time. We found the gas mask, we found the Air Force device, found this other stuff, and then you have people like Linda Moulton Howe who are the UFO-centric cattle mutilation people,
right.
And they're like, oh, well, that's just the aliens playing tricks on us. They're trying to cover their tracks.
Right.
Which, that's my same reaction. They just laugh. I just laugh at that. It's like, come on. Seriously. Then you look at things like after 9/11, September 11, 2001, cattle mutilations abruptly stopped for 9 months.
Yeah.
Just nothing.
Sure.
Well, you can draw the parallels where you want, but that is a very fascinating piece of evidence.
But you draw the parallels for us, though.
I would say that the government that is probably doing this, more likely than not doing this, were distracted with other things rather than just like doing testing on animals and things like that.
So what you're saying here is that the government
yes,
is behind cattle mutilations, probably because, I'm just going to take a logical assumption here, there are nuclear nuclear plants, military bases, probably underground missile silos or whatever. And then on top of that, so you've got these cattle that, So what you're saying is that basically government agents are like chasing people away, possibly with helicopters and stuff like that. Also mutilating these cattle as a way to cover their tracks, or perhaps distract from the fact that like 100 meters underground is a freaking nuclear silo, right?
So I didn't say the exact motive. So the idea is that they are testing for radiation leaks in our food supply. And they're seeing if like leaks and radiation and poisoning is getting out into the open air, into society. So we'll thread that needle a little bit more. Bear with me just a bit longer.
Yeah, keep going.
But that's the idea. They're doing testing.
Okay.
They're doing testing, and that's why it's all around here. So in favor of this, I mean, the motive is testing, obviously. The means, it's like they got unlimited resources.
Sure.
They could probably do this, swooping in with helicopters and picking these suckers up and taking the things they need to do the testing and then dropping them back off later, right?
Versus just paying $1,200 for a cattle and saying, hey, can I have one of your cattle so I can test?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that...
I don't know. It sounds a lot harder to do that than it does just to pay a farmer $1,200. Be like, hey, we're just testing. We're just, the FDA. We want to understand, changes in dietary habits, effects of global warming on these cattle. Here's $1,200.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said it at the outset, man. You can poke holes in absolutely everything.
Yes, no. I'm not saying it's ridiculous. I'm just saying I don't categorically buy it.
Sure. Cool. Okay. Well, cons, like you said, they could just buy it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Exactly.
All over the country, different times, supposing that the ranchers are willing to sell them.
Well, also don't forget you talked about the UK and Australia too. So okay.
I don't know, man. The more I do this, the more confusing it gets. Like
I get it.
Totally. Okay.
That's okay.
So, couple reports. There were a couple major reports, government reports and other reports. The Pentagon looked into this in the early 60s. They came to the conclusion. Well, some of them came to the conclusions that the Soviets were doing it. Some of them came to the conclusion that there were aliens that were behind this. So, FOIA. Thank you, FOIA. So, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, he looked into the phenomenon, and he asked an agent that worked with him on this. Agent worked for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, who he used to work, UFO stuff with. And the two of them found absolutely no UFO connection. Okay? So this is like J. Allen Hynek. He's Mr. UFO, right? Very respected guy in the ufology community. They said, quote, a certain pattern existed. The animal would be found in the middle of an open field. Various parts of the body had been surgically removed, such as the sex organs, eyes, ears, lips, tongue, teats, etc. And in many cases, the blood had been drained from the animal. And in several cases, veterinarians were unable to determine the cause of death. Most concurred that the removal of the various organs was surgical with some sharp instrument. This agent contacted the Minneapolis U.S. Attorney, and the U.S. Attorney said that, well, it's probably satanic organizations. So,
love it.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Hynek said that there was no proof or evidence that UFOs were connected to cattle mutilations, but satanic cults was more likely. So...
Yeah. All right.
I mean, that's kind of where that came down. March 1975, the governor of Oklahoma ordered a full investigation by the Department of Public Safety, and they came to the conclusions that mutilations, quote, can be attributed to individuals getting in on a fad or young people dissecting dead carcasses for biological or experimental purposes. In other words, it's kind of like a biology class or hula hoops or the twist. Kind of just
truly a fad, a cattle mutilation fad.
It's just what the kids are doing nowadays.
Fall into the gap.
So there was a famous conference that was held in 1979 out in New Mexico. The senator of New Mexico hosted this. It was the first multi-state mutilation conference, Albuquerque, New Mexico. There were federal, state, local law enforcement officials, scientists, corporate executives, state representatives, private investigators, movie producers, brand stock inspectors, ranchers, ufologists, you name it. Everyone came. He kicked it off. The senator kicked it off, said there's been an estimated $2.5 million of damage in New Mexico alone. This was a thing. It was happening. People's livelihoods were at stake. He believed it was individuals. He discussed these mystery helicopters, mystery helicopters. And then he opened up the stage. UFO person got on and started talking about UFOs, and the whole thing just went south in the span of like 15 minutes. And that was kind of the end of it. But after that conference, there were no cattle mutilations in New Mexico for 3 years.
Huh.
Interesting. I don't know what that means, but it's like the moment you draw attention to it, it's like it just kind of vanishes.
Gotcha.
And then lastly, the most famous report on this was called the Rommel Report. Kenneth Rommel spent about 28 years in the FBI. He was tasked to trying to figure this out. He's given the job of researching by the district attorney's office. This came from Senator Schmidt, etc. But he built a database of mutilations mostly by researching newspaper articles, magazine articles, stuff like that. And he determined that the majority of the cases were done by predators.
Sure.
Bobcats.
Yep.
Big birds of prey.
Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds, right. Missing parts. He said that the missing parts were generally the same that was consumed by predators and scavengers. It was a year-long probe. He really only looked at about 15 different cases of the hundreds, if not thousands, that he could have done. And pretty much like everyone with any stake in this just completely laughed at him. They just dismissed it. They dismissed the whole case. They're just like, this is a joke. Like to the point where they think that he was just kind of like, maybe he knew and he's like trying to lead everyone off in the other direction, like clear obfuscation sort of thing.
Yes, of course.
So, but I mean, the whole thing is riddled with inaccuracies and falsehoods. He says that there's puncture marks on the jugular vein of a cow that came from a rattlesnake bite. It's like, what? That doesn't even make sense. He said that the precision cuts on a horse was castration done by a rancher. It's like, why would you? Not even going to go there, but I mean, that makes no sense. Just, all sorts of like finding weird drugs and stuff in the bodies or trace elements of these drugs in the mutilation bodies. He said that they came from hippies. Okay, sure, drugs, hippies.
They're just
great.
Hippies everywhere doing this.
So right. But there was no mention of satanic cults, so you can, be happy that was, crossed off the list. But again, after this report came out, mutilations across the country just dropped significantly, to a trickle, and during his investigation as well. So it's like, again, like
people paying attention.
So the heat's
down.
on, so don't do it. Which to me, that's like number one. It's probably not UFOs and probably not ultraterrestrials or cryptids or whatever.
Sure. Cause and effect.
Okay, I know I said last, but this is the last report. NIDS. Remember them? So Robert Bigelow's pet program stands for the National Institute for the Discovery of Science. They came to the conclusion that it was disease testing. So he said, or the report said, quote, it's carried out by a knowledgeable group that is cognizant of the biochemistry and infectious potential of prion disease and their fatal spread. So prion disease would be like mad cow disease.
Oh, yeah.
So it's literally just going out and testing these animals to see that the supply chain is not infected. Because if it is, then you got to either stop buying or cut this off at its source.
Right.
And that's what we do. You just bounce around. You test these things around certain areas, certain things, certain facilities, and figure it out. And he said it is probably not the government that is doing the mutilation.
Okay.
Thank you for staying with us this long. I know this is a little bit longer than our typical episode, but if you subscribe to the theory that it is testing, and if you subscribe to the theory that it's either disease or radiation or some sort of testing like that, and if you believe the NIDS report and It's interesting. They funneled a lot of money into that.
I was going to say, it's actually surprising to me that they didn't walk away with a UFO extra ultra-terrestrial, conclusion.
Thank you.
That surprises me, genuinely.
Exactly. It's like when people like Hynek say it's not UFOs, it's like it would be so easy for him to say UFOs.
Oh, yeah. You would expect that.
Or when, Robert Bigelow's group is like, it's not the government, it's not UFOs. We don't know.
Right.
So if you take all that into account, if you believe that, I have another theory I'd like to posit.
Sure.
I'm not sure if this is an original or not. I've read so much. I'm not going to go back and look at all my notes to figure out if I came up with this or if it's something I, read once and then forgot about and thought of later. Let me just kind of back into this, Zach. So 1975 was the peak year for cattle mutilations. Mm-hmm. It's never been as high before or since.
Sure.
It was also the peak year for the number of cattle on Earth and the beef consumption in the United States and worldwide.
Okay.
Interesting correlation, okay? So without sounding like a broken record, you got unmarked helicopters flying around before and or after these mutilations where the cattle are found. Mm-hmm. The same things are always taken: organs, jaw, blood. But you look at the jaw, for example. Seems kind of odd at first glance, right? But the jaw is where enzymes are produced that can kill viruses and bacteria, right? The ears, which are often also taken, act as a kind of a filter for the inside of the cow's body. The rectum is a filter of its own sort at the end of the digestive tract, okay? And it would store traces of toxins and chemicals it was exposed to, the cattle was exposed to throughout its life, right?
Okay, yeah.
Some of the tissues, when they do find a fresh mutilation, they get it to a lab in time and they're able to do these tests, show that there's exposure to heat on these cattle around 300 degrees Fahrenheit or more. They're also often finding pharmaceutical drugs inside these bodies of these animals. But what's interesting is it's barbiturates, anticoagulants, synthetic amphetamines, aluminum, titanium, oxygen, silicone flakes, and antimony, which are not veterinary drugs. They are human drugs.
Sure.
So why would they use human drugs on cattle? I think it potentially has to do with medical testing. And if it's not the government, who else has a lot of resources and a huge stake in this, pun intended?
I know.
The beef industry, man.
Okay.
So you look at like the mad cow disease breakout or the foot and mouth disease or whatever that was breakout. They had to slaughter entire herds, like the entire, from the rancher all the way to the franchise owner at McDonald's, like everyone took a hit. Mm-hmm. So in order to prevent that from happening, you go around and you collect this stuff and you do these tests, and you don't keep the body because you don't need the body. And it also kind of throws people off the trail, right? Mm-hmm. And you collect these certain things that show certain, do they have a disease? Is the disease spreading? Has it got to this herd? Did it go to that herd? Mm-hmm. All this stuff. But you look at, man, and the most recent numbers I could find was 2014. 1.3 billion cattle on Earth. They take up over 25% of the land mass. 70% of the grain produced is for livestock. Yeah. It's ridiculous. There's over 260 million acres that were cleared specifically for cattle. Mm-hmm. This is a huge industry that touches nearly every single person on Earth. Billions upon billions of dollars. Beef is the largest income producing sector in the entire United States agriculture industry. $44 billion a year. This is not something you just kind of like, well, I hope no cattle are sick this year. The rancher's not going to tell you if his cattle are sick. The rancher might not even know if his cattle are sick. Right. So you do this testing to make sure that like your $44 billion industry continues. So most mutilations occur on these small independent ranches. They're not like the huge, giant, livestock, things.
Feedlots or whatever.
Feedlots, thank you. Yeah, factory farms, because those are easily tested.
I was going to say that's
you
so
could grab
easy,
any cow there and do
you can
all
test 20 in like 30 seconds probably.
Right, but these smaller ones that are spread out throughout the entire United States, you might need to do this sort of thing. Why the United States? Well, even though we're about 5% of the world's population, we consume about 25% of its beef.
Yeah,
and a majority of the beef does come from the United States. It's shipped worldwide. Who has the money to do this? Well, I'm not wanting to get into a lawsuit, but allegedly, different people with the resources.
Yeah.
You look at, say, Tyson.
Sure.
Right? They process 175,000 cattle a week.
A week?
And they make about $16 billion a year.
Sure.
Cargill.
That's not that much. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, Cargill, 8 billion pounds of beef a year they process and handle. JBS USA, which is Brazilian-based, enormous, multinational. Yep.
Yeah.
National Beef is a company that processes or handles 13% of all beef in the United States, and the world's largest purchaser of beef is none other than Macandon Supper Club.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably McDonald's.
The Golden Arches.
Yeah, the Golden Arcs.
I don't know. I know there's 100 holes you could poke into that theory, just like anything else. But as far as I'm concerned, why not?
Well, this is more logical than a, onesie twosie, Satanist, teens playing pranks, cattle rustlers trying to reclaim some cattle. Like, this actually could make sense. It does not explain, of course, the surgical precision.
So, I mean, okay, let's talk about that. You got a helicopter, flies in, scoops it up. Maybe they take it to a truck like 12 miles away. They dissect that sucker with what? Surgical instruments. They put a hose in the jugular, get all the blood out, do the test they need to.
I mean, like,
fly it back and drop it in a field.
No, I mean, like, look, I understand neither of us have done this before. But everything you just laid out, sounds like a lot of work. Like that,
it does.
That doesn't sound easy. Like if it was I hate to say this, like a cat or something. Like you could maybe that would make a little more sense.
Right.
Something that weighs like a ton. Yeah. Probably not. I think. I don't know. So it's a very viable, totally reasonable, actually makes sense. And by the way, I would say not only do they have the means to do it, but they obviously have the motive, so it's all there. But I just think it's a stretch.
Then what is it?
I don't know.
Right.
Cryptids.
God, it's okay. So at the outset, I just said I want to be done with it, man. It's confusing. It's disgusting. I've thought way too much about this. But it's like at the end of the day, the most frustrating part is like, I got nothing. No, I have no idea.
I don't either.
Okay, so real quick, let's. I know this has gone long. I don't want to belabor this, but real quick, if you were to rank like top one or two.
Oh, I'm going, and I'm not saying this. This is not hyperbole. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going ultra-terrestrial.
Okay. Totally.
I'm not saying it's like I recognize that within the framework of this show, like. That's going to be with, what I go with. Do I walk around as a living, breathing adult human person thinking, yeah, probably cattle mutilations are a result of like ultra-terrestrial beings? Not generally, but like I would say within everything we've heard, to me, I'm buying that one. This one that you brought up, I mean, like, look, let's face it. Well, by the way, do I need to now like look into finances on your behalf to understand? Is somebody else paying you to say it's the cattle industry? Like I'm worried now.
Big Chicken is paying me to say this.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
What you said made sense, and I could totally buy it too.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think logistically it's as easy to pull off as you described.
Dude,
but
I don't know. But somehow, someone, something has done this tens of thousands of times.
Over decades.
Over
continents.
I just like, what?
Exactly.
So, all right, guys. I mean, I gave you my ideas. I'd love to hear yours.
Do tell. Seriously.
So,
let us know what you think.
I mean,
or if you've heard other angles to this that we could, look into, it'd be fun to talk about.
Zach will look into all the ones from here on out.
Tim's really excited to read another book on this topic, I'm sure.
Anyway, guys, thanks for sticking with it. I know this was longer. I hope you liked it. If you're new to the show, we mentioned earlier, we got a Patreon. Head on over there, get a bunch of other episodes and a weekly fun little thing we do as well. Or just hit that rate, review, and subscribe button. The subscribe button and the one review button.
Yeah, it's all one button.
Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Rate, review, subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local veterinarian about our podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.